Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar introducing the new editions of Essential Mathematics Core for the Australian Curriculum V9 and Victorian Curriculum V2. My name is Kim Keane and I'm the State Manager for Queensland. Before we start this afternoon, in the spirit of reconciliation, Cambridge University Press and Assessment acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. A little housekeeping before we get started. You can use the chat window for any questions that you might have throughout the session, and we'll respond to these questions either in the chat itself or during the Q&A sessions following the presentations. Also know that I will run some slides showing release dates following presentations this afternoon as well. Let me introduce you to our presenters this evening. So our first presenter is David Greenwood. He is the lead author for the Cambridge Essential series and has authored more than 80 titles for the Australian curriculum and for the syllabuses of the states and territories. He specialises in analysing curriculum and the sequencing of course content for school mathematics courses. Following David's presentation, you'll hear from our mathematics publishing manager, Scott Halligan, and you'll then hear from Justin Robinson, who is co-founder of the Wellbeing Distillery, an organisation committed to energising, equipping and empowering teachers. He consults with schools globally on the fields of student and educator wellbeing. You'll also then hear from the publisher on this series, Claire Murray, and she'll be running through some Q&A questions as we run into the session with both the authors, and also Scott Halligan will join us then. So without further ado, please welcome David Greenwood.
Thank you very much, Kim, and thank you everyone for joining us. Be good to talk about the Australian Curriculum version 9 and Victorian Curriculum, but also about the new Core 2nd edition from Cambridge University Press. What I will focus on in my short session will be a little bit about the content changes. Some of you might be familiar with some of the changes already because we've already seen a version of the Australian Curriculum 9 and Victorian Curriculum 2, which has already been implemented in schools across the country. I'll talk about the content changes specifically and what we've done in the core series. In particular, I'll mention modelling and computational thinking and talk about some of the resources that we have prepared there. We will talk in detail about some of the digital resources, and Scott will talk about the diagnostic tool, which is a very exciting new resource for not just the standard Essential series, but also for Core as well. Just a quick summary on what's happened with the Australian Curriculum and Victorian Curriculum. The three major strands of number and algebra, measurement and geometry, and probably in statistics have been divided into six major strands with those obvious splits, and with geometry now called space. So with that, there has been less need, I guess, for substrands, and so the substrands underneath those major strands have been deleted, and those 6 strands lead straight to the content descriptors and elaborations. There they are, with geometry being space. This is what they look like. Obviously, there's been some refinement done with the content descriptors in both the new AC and VC, and the elaborations have been refined to match. There's also an emphasis on investigation, modelling, technology and algorithms, which is coming through in both the Australian Curriculum and Victorian Curriculum, which is great to see. Just focusing on the year levels, these are a list of some of the key changes in the curriculum, and these also have been responded to in the Cambridge Essential series, the standard and the core series now. So place value with expanded notation is something that has more of an emphasis at year 7. Working with formulas, volume of triangular prisms is new, and an introduction to circles, pi and circumference is new to year 7. There's an emphasis, of course, on statistical investigations, simulations and algorithms, and that's common to all year levels, but something that's also true for year 7. In Year 8, financial applications is stronger, linear modelling, Pythagoras is now core rather than being extension, 3D objects and coordinates, and the usual three algorithms, computational thinking, investigations and simulations is coming through at Year 8 and also Year 9 with more on irrational numbers. There's more algebra now in core at Year 9, and I think this is perhaps one of the big improvements of the new curriculum for Australian and Victoria. Factorising, expanding quadratics, and opening up some pathways into Year 10 and expanding the opportunities beyond that into Year 11 and Year 12. Again, technology and graphing, errors in measurement is coming through at Year 9. Sampling and a little bit more in statistics is also visible in the curriculum, and we have responded to that with the core series as well. Year 10, again, errors is coming through. Exponential relations and equations, simple ones, of course, used to be 10A, but is now in the core. An introduction to logarithmic scales. So I'm not talking about logarithm laws there, but just introduction to logarithms and scales, networks, and some of the other things I've talked about already is coming through into Year 10. There is also some new content for the optional or 10A content for Australian curriculum, Victorian curriculum, but we're not going to focus on that here because we know that the core series doesn't spend a great deal of time on the optional material. So we won't need to worry about solving trig equations, counting principles in the core series. That is there, though, in the standard series and opens up pathways into higher levels of mathematics at Year 11 and 12. As I've said, there's an emphasis on modelling and computational thinking, digital technologies and so on. And so that's something I'd like to talk about in terms of the Cambridge response. So I'll just briefly go through some of the retained features and some of the new features of the series. If any of you are familiar with the new Essential Standard series, which came out a year ago, and are familiar with some of the new features there, you will see many of those coming through in the core series as well. Before we get to there, I'd just like to go through a couple of reasons why some teachers might like to use core. And perhaps the main reasons are listed here, and I'll just mention a couple of them. So overall, with the core series, the language used is simpler. So the language has been re-engineered from beginning right through to the end, so students can access that language if they're a little bit weaker with their literacy. Key vocabulary are listed, are highlighted, and there's also a glossary. So these are the kinds of things that are in core. Many problems in the exercises have special hints to help keep students moving, and exercises have been built with simpler starting problems and a gentler rise in the difficulty as they work through the varying proficiency strands. There's more consolidating sections to revise and catch up key content, and examples are positioned carefully via the exercises and are written to slow down and space out the learning, I would say, are the main reasons why teachers would use core. Just a little bit on differentiation first, because with Cambridge, of course, we have the two series, the standard series and the core series. So this opens up a high degree of differentiation available for mathematics teachers in schools to offer a range of course for their students. So at level 1, you have the choice between the standard series and the core series. And that is a fairly significant choice for a school. And I'll talk a little bit about how that might be used in schools later. But then after that, teachers can choose which sections would be appropriate. And we use a classification series. And this example up on the top right, you can see we have some consolidating sections and some extending sections. And this is the classification used in the standard series. But for the core, we have a similar thing where we have some consolidating sections We have no extending sections because the core series does not go beyond that year level that we're working with. But we have used a gold star to indicate what we think are more challenging sections. And so that would help teachers choose which sections are appropriate for their students. And then at the third level, there are the work programs where we have 3 choices for the standard series and 2 choices for the core, where we offer a level of differentiation there, offering slightly easier or slightly more challenging pathways through each exercise. It's probably important to note right now that there is a very strong correlation between core and standard in terms of how the chapters work between year 7 and I would say 9. There's more division once you get to year 10 for obvious reasons, leading to pathways to year 11 and 12, but there's a strong correlation there. And so if a student is working on core at one particular year level, there's no reason why they couldn't move to the standard series in another semester or another year level. So that's a little bit on differentiation. The book structure is perhaps something you're familiar with, but with the new core second edition, many of these things have been refined and updated, especially in light of the diagnostic tool, where we have defined many hundreds of skills, and that's had an influence on the learning intentions for each section, what examples we're doing, what content we want to cover, and how we connect that with the curriculum and the success criteria of the section. So you can see here, this is not every page in this section, but you can see the learning intentions are still there, the introduction, the lesson starter providing a hook for teachers if they want an activity at the very start of the lesson, the comprehensive but efficient and precise key ideas. But this is where core is a little bit more on its own, if you like, and that is that the examples are placed at an appropriate place inside the exercise just before the question that is linked to that example. So we have the understanding questions first, making those connections with previous knowledge, the fluency questions, often with the examples spread throughout that before moving to problem solving and reasoning. The now you tries, which are those second example questions that you could use in class, still exist inside the examples, and of course all those have videos to attach them as well. Every exercise has like a mini enrichment activity, even in the core series, and that's the gold star question at the end. That is the section structure. But when we come to look at this chapter structure, all those resources that you might be used to and some of the new resources are listed here. So the warm-up quiz, the progress quiz about halfway through the chapter, the maths at work investigation is there. But what's new is our modelling and technology and computational thinking investigations before they get to some of the summary material at the end of the chapter and glossary. Let's talk a little bit about modelling, because this is very important in the new curriculum and it's something that we have spent a while trying to respond to. So with modelling, there's a definition for you to read, but what we've tried to do is develop a task for each chapter right across the series. So that's 40 from 7 to year 10. We've tried to develop a common language in line with the curriculum using words like analyse, represent, solve, determine, interpret and communicate and so on. And we've used this right across our activities. We've tried to form strong links with real life theoretical and statistical investigations, and we've tried to make connections with the experience that students might have at year 11 and year 12 when they do investigation work. This is probably too small to read, but this is an example in year 7. But it does show the structure that's common to all investigations. And we really wanted to have that consistency with our structure. So when students did these activities, they knew what they were getting into. So each problem has a context at the start. preliminary tasks to help students become familiar with the problem and the associated mathematics, and then the modelling task, which is a semi-scaffolded task to help students explore and experiment and solve in this situation. As well as that, we have the extension at the end for those students that might be able to explore the problem at a deeper level. You can see that some of those key words like formulate and solve and evaluate and verify and communicate are listed down the side corresponding to various components of the modelling task. And one of the new things we're offering this year through Cambridge is a supplied set of rubrics for all these types of activities, whether it be the modelling task or it might be the computational thinking task. Here's a Year 10 example where they're modelling with data and making some predictions using box plots and bivariate data and so on. One of the other investigations, which I've already mentioned, is the technology and computational thinking tasks, where we are using technology like spreadsheets, graphing software, dynamic geometry to solve problems that would normally be solved with some kind of step-by-step process, maybe an algorithm, or it would involve a numerical solution. There may be a simulation, or we might be doing a statistical investigation. Here's an example for Year 7 where we have a context. We have, again, a getting started activity, and then we use digital tools to represent, explore, and experiment. And as I said before, the main tools that we've chosen are tools that are freely available for all students. That's like a spreadsheet, a free dynamic geometry package like Desmos, which comes with the Cambridge series anyway, or graphing software. Each activity has an algorithmic thinking type component as well, where students are using a step-by-step procedure to solve the problem, to zoom in perhaps, to explore cases, or to home in on a numerical solution, or even run like a flowchart or a simulation to collect more and more data. Extension is there available as well. This is a Year 7 example and a Year 10 example where they're using graphing software to maximize or minimize a particular situation with financial mathematics. Before I move on to Scott, there are a couple of other features I really need to zero in on, if I may, and that is that we have decided to create, after collecting plenty of teacher feedback, a skill sheet, a one-page, maybe two-side skill sheet for every section, every lesson across the series. So this is a brand new resource. Yes, there are plenty of other worksheets and tests available on the teacher digital resources page or folder, but we decided that something for every single lesson, a short quiz, a lesson starter quiz, or a homework quiz is something that teachers would like, something they could print out on one piece of paper. And these have been created for every lesson, as I say, and are strongly linked to the textbook examples and the key ideas and the success criteria of each section. Perhaps about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes work for a student. These are in printable form and in Word form as well, which could be adjusted by staff if they wanted to. So that's the skill sheets. And one of the other key resources that is in the standard series, but also in core, are the PowerPoint lessons now, where every element of the introductory material of a lesson is presented in an interactive PowerPoint presentation where teachers have full control on what's been delivered. So the learning intentions, the lesson starter, the examples in interactive form, the Now You Tries as well, where teachers can control when the question comes up, which part comes up, when the solution comes up, is now part of this resource. All the key ideas, etc., are in the PowerPoint lessons. So I believe, Scott, that will be one of the popular resources that will come as part of the new series for core. If I could pass over to you and talk about the diagnostic tool.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and one of the reasons for creating those PowerPoints was we certainly heard a lot about the effort that a lot of schools were going to in order to create these type of review PowerPoints or lesson summary PowerPoints themselves, spending hours taking screenshots by themselves and from the PDFs and so on, and putting them in a PowerPoint form to serve the purpose of having something they could show in the classroom. So we put that together to really try and save teachers time, and it's quite similar for this diagnostic assessment tool that we have built. We were finding that there were schools who were trying to build these kinds of things themselves using Cambridge content, and although we'd been thinking about it for a while, we certainly started seeing quite a lot of sort of homemade, so to speak, assessment tools using Cambridge content that schools were trying to build themselves, which were taking them so much time. So I won't go too far into the details about this, and same with you, David. We've covered this diagnostic assessment tool in other forums, other webinars, other presentations at conferences and so on. If you've seen any of those in the last couple of years or been on the Cambridge mailing list, you will have heard about this. But the main thing we wanted to build was something that really put a lot of our pedagogical thinking and our philosophy about creating educational resources into the form of a diagnostic assessment tool. So for the core series in particular, these are some of the things that we would emphasize as being particularly suitable for students at a slightly lower level than those at the standard series using the main series. We didn't want the tool to be demotivating. We wanted to make sure that the emphasis was on growth rather than self-comparison against a student's peers. We deliberately didn't, for example, we chose not to make a student's results in a diagnostic assessment automatically available to them straight away, so that it wouldn't be demotivating, and that the focus would be on what they could do, and then what they could do about any gaps in their knowledge. Next slide, please, David. And we also wanted to build a whole heap of tools for the teacher in order to empower their students to foster maybe a love of mathematics is a little bit naive, but certainly a better relationship to their mathematical studies, and perhaps try and change their perception of themselves as being bad at maths, so to speak. And Justin will certainly speak to that later on. So the main thing is you can do a whole heap of things with this tool. You can read about the details when you get a copy of these slides after the webinar in the next couple of days. There's a whole heap of information about all of this, but essentially you can use the textbook structure in order to create a whole set of diagnostic assessment tools as you progress through a teaching program. And one of the advantages of that with the core series is that we're not just applying the same diagnostic assessment tests as for the standard series to this core series. So what will be available with the core series is something that is connected to every lesson of this series. So for example, there's more revision in the textbooks, therefore there's more diagnostic assessment material on the revision of previous year levels compared to the main series. There's no extension material, etc. There's a slower pace through chapters because of the way that the textbooks are structured, and the fact that this tool mirrors that structure in terms of its content. And then the main thing to finish up on is the opportunities for talking to students about what they can do about their results. They're not inevitably poor at mathematics or any specific topic at mathematics. There are specific things that they can do to improve, and this tool will help encourage those conversations. And then finally, with the report types, there are a whole heap of report types, most of them orientated towards growth, students' growth, where they are now compared to where they were a month ago or 2 months ago. Just one final thing, David, you could probably talk a little bit about this yourself on the mixture of difficulty levels. So if a school has thought about what diagnostic assessment and the level of difficulty of the questions that they want to see in their standard series, what kind of decisions they could make to slightly tailor the level of questions to their core students, so to speak, while also understanding that it's important to have a certain benchmark and consistency across assessment of all students, so that the results are actually authentic and meaningful and reflect the student body. But David, is there anything you want to say more about that?
Yeah, well, we were thinking, every class is different and schools operate their classes in different ways. So as well as having the ability to choose questions that relate to what they have taught, which sections they've used in the textbook or which elements of the curriculum they've covered, we also want that ability for them to choose a level of difficulty. And so we've come up with those 4 ratios, allowing teachers to make the diagnostic quizzes a little bit easier, or something in the middle, or a little bit more challenging. And one of the things we've used and created on behalf of the authors and the IT team at Cambridge is a special balancing matrix, which basically tries to maximize the content coverage on the parts of the curriculum that the teachers have chosen, but also meet the ratio of the questions, easy, medium, and hard, that's been chosen by the teacher with one of these 4 options. So we're very proud, if you like, of this balancing matrix and how it works, and we think it'll be quite useful in allowing teachers to have flexibility but also produce a balanced piece of assessment.
Yep, that's right. And these next slides really give a very quick overview of some of the report types. But David, if you flick through a few, these will be very familiar to schools, these kinds of reports and different filtering options and so on. But maybe a couple more, David. This one is a comparison of pre-test and post-test results. This one is also that, but in a different form, showing the mathematical skills on the left that are being covered. Next slide, please, David. And this is an interesting one. This is we've got on the y-axis, we've got a measure of growth, and then on the x-axis a measure of attainment, essentially percentage correct on a post-test. So there is an opportunity to look at data in a way that emphasizes how well students are doing in terms of how much they've grown, not necessarily whether they're below or above average in terms of their actual test results. So you can see students, for example, who may be below average according to their peers in terms of their results, but are growing above average. And this is a little bit more about the follow-up work as well. But attendees can read up about the details of this separately and look at some of Cambridge's other resources that go into more detail about how all of this works, including in particular that landing page, which does really contain a lot of information, links to how-to videos, links to a previous webinar recording that we've done just about diagnostics, and a how-to manual as well. So that's probably about it. I think there'll be a lot of opportunities in the discussion that we're about to have to talk a little bit about the links of between mindset and the pedagogy of this series, as well as the diagnostics tool. So without further ado, I will hand over to Justin Robinson, and then following Justin, there'll be a discussion facilitated by my colleague, Claire Murray, who is the publisher of the series. So over to you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Scott. Lovely to see you all, or to be a part of this webinar with you. For me, it's personally been a pleasure to be a part of the author team at Cambridge for the last 15 years. I'm involved with the Year 7 and the Year 8 math series. And the author team have been, or currently are, just passionate educators and passionate about student and staff wellbeing. And of course, if you're passionate about student wellbeing, we know how important success is to contributing to that level of, happiness, or that level of enjoying school and enjoying the subject. Scott caught, he said naively, but kind of, we do aspire, of course, for our students to love mathematics. And it's pretty hard not to love mathematics when you're going pretty well at it. And gosh, it's pretty hard to enjoy mathematics when you're not really feeling much success. And predominantly, that's been the goal of establishing the core series to complement the essential series, to give a greater range of ability in the maths classroom to meet with and feel some success, significant success. And I just want to talk and share a few slides, my passion for student wellbeing, and some ideas and thoughts for you. And I hope they are helpful and supportive. You can see the evolution of the diagnostic tool, the evolution of the aspects that we've shifted within the textbooks to try to differentiate, to try to save you time, and we hope they do. Now, interestingly, when I kind of talk about achievement, and having taught for so many years and know the importance of achievement, but actually researching deeply into supporting student achievement, I resonate strongly with this quote by Alfie Kohn. And Alfie Kohn says that actually the first thing about accomplishment, or the first thing about achievement, is actually not focusing on it. And I think this is critically important, because it's kind of the go-to of where the student or the family or the teacher sometimes go. What's the target score, or how do I get an A? And the suggestion a little bit is, if you just focus predominantly on that achievement, there is the danger of potentially that leading to competition over collaboration, of increasing levels of anxiety and stress, of potentially leading to unethical behaviour, of copying or cheating, and potentially leading to a lack of intrinsic motivation due to the extrinsic motivator of the achievement. So I think this concept of course, we're passionate about achievement, but can we do this indirectly and subtly? And so the question potentially comes, well, if we're not focusing on achievement, what should we focus on? And we would suggest that you should focus on these three areas. Not exclusive, and I'm sure you could list and think of, as a teacher yourself, other areas. But if we can focus on the students' belief in their ability, their passion and interest in the subject, and the progress, and that's where that diagnostic tool can be so powerful. So let me just talk briefly about all three. So firstly, with this concept of belief and a sense of self-belief. So firstly, a question that I'm not sure whether you have asked your students one-on-one or anonymously and asked them to kind of, give a reply on a little slip of paper, but do they genuinely believe that they can succeed in maths? Because the importance of this sense of self-belief is vital to the actual sense of achievement. This concept of, that many of you will be familiar with, a fixed or growth mindset, is almost the perfect example of a self-fulfilling prophecy. A student with a fixed mindset kind of believes that their ability is kind of fixed in stone and there's not much they can do about it. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't think they're smart, but they just think it was kind of fixed. I was born with these genetics. And the challenge with that is, therefore, when you're struggling and you're coming up against difficulty, and remember, learning's meant to be difficult, maths is meant to be hard. That's a kind of sign that you're learning if it's challenging. And so, but therefore, if they go, this is too hard, I can't do this, a fixed mindset says, well, there's not much point trying. So, you know, that kind of backtracking method that my teacher just explained, which I didn't, maybe that, but it's not going to help me. I'm not really that good at maths. Like I'm a bit fixed in, it won't make much difference. And so you believe that it's not going to make much difference. So not surprisingly, you don't try that hard. And then not surprisingly, because you haven't tried that hard or asked for much help, you go and do an assessment and you don't actually grow much or show much progress. And therefore it confirms. See, I told you I'm not that good at this math stuff. And vice versa, the growth mindset says, gosh, this is hard, this maths, but I reckon I can keep improving. I can keep progressing. I might need to ask some questions from a mate, from the teacher. I might need to check some resources in the book. I might need to do some even more kind of practice. And then funnily enough, because they try these strategies, unsurprisingly, they then do a bit better. And then there's their self-fulfilling prophecy. I thought I could get a bit better. And guess what? I got a bit better. So this concept of asking the student, do you genuinely know and understand that not just your brain, even my brain at my old age is still plastic, is still malleable. I can still grow new neural pathways and new neural networks through practice, through repetition. So we very much want to help the students believe that they can do this work. One of my favourite sentences that I'd like to say to a class at the start of the year or midway through or something like is just this kind of concept, and the same to parents and to my colleagues. And I love this, that we should be prepared to be surprised. The students should be prepared to be surprised that maybe they found it unbelievably hard last year, but maybe this year will be different because of their maturity, their ability to suddenly think more abstractly that might have evolved and developed. And you don't notice as much as you notice kind of getting taller and those sorts of things. But there is a maturing in your ability to think abstractly from concrete through to abstract thinking. But be surprised as a teacher that student that you heard of might be a misbehaving student. Be surprised that it might change. Something might trigger in them and click in them. So this idea that the parent, the teacher, the student should be prepared to be surprised. Who knows what's in store for us in this topic, in this year, and so on. So I love that little phrase. From belief, I wanted to talk about passion. As David mentioned, at the lesson starters endeavours to give a hook. And I think a question you need to ask yourself is, what's my hook for the students here? How am I going to try to capture some enthusiasm, some interest, some curiosity? We hope the lesson starters are help, but I'm sure you've got many great examples or photos or stories of ways of you kind of showing the interest and the curiosity about learning these mathematical concepts. And secondly, I think it's just important to show your own passion. You know that your enthusiasm, your celebration of the progress, your excitement in what we're learning and what you're teaching can certainly rub off to the students. And the third one that I really wanted to talk about is this concept of progress. And the way I'd like us to think about it is firstly personalize it to you and say, can you actually, like literally right now, just give you kind of like 10 seconds, but can you think of a time when you've experienced the feeling of making progress? It might be you're getting a little bit better at your swimming, or you've been trying to learn how to kind of run 5K, or you've been learning a bit more about AI, or you've got a little bit better at cooking, or whatever. This feeling of progress is probably one of the universal feelings, human feelings, that is just deeply valued. I am getting a little bit better at my swimming at the moment. I'm still nowhere near a very good swimmer, but gosh, that sense of progress will make me go and try to have a swim. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe the next day, but sometime in the next 2 days, because I got a little bit quicker, or I went a bit further. And so we need to try to help our students see and feel progress. I think primary school teachers are very good at this through portfolio work, and maybe it's slightly easier when you go, look at your handwriting from the start of the year in year 2, or look at this progress. And maybe I think it's harder in secondary schools, but I think it is just as important. Here's a question for you. You've got a student in year 7 who got a C. You've got a student in year 8. That same student then went to year 8 and got another C. The same student then got to year 9 and got another C. I suspect that student and that parent thinks that they're not progressing at all. Of course, they are progressing. The maths is getting harder. They're still getting a C, which is, I think, the potential of why they think, see, I'm still no good at maths. And, you choose the letter to put there for the story or the narrative. When I was a maths teacher, I never actually asked a year 10 student, I never gave a year 10 student a year 7 maths test. And I wish I had of. And I'm curious about, is there a student, a student that's struggling to see progress in your class, and somehow, if you've got the time, you can individually say to that student, could I just give you this year 7 test? You know how you got a C on that a few years ago. And there's a good chance they'll get 90% on that. And they will have then seen their progress. So how do you, and I think the diagnostic tool is beautiful for it, the pre-test, the midway through, the post-test, the little scatter plot that Scott just showed of showing the growth rate. So please lean into these resources as you lean into your own relationship with your students to help them recognize progress, because that becomes such a great motivator. In many ways, the goal is this kind of Goldilocks zone of, can we make things not so hard that we get discouraged and not so easy that we get bored? And I know you know this, and I know you know how hard it is with your mixed ability classroom. And even if streamed within your stream classroom, there is still great diversity. And this is what makes teaching so challenging and demanding, and also rewarding. So when you look at that little strip on the right, this just right looks pretty high up this strip of the idea of where it is, this zone. And just right, there's actually a recent research study that suggests what this just right level is. Of course, I'm sure it's different for different people, and it's not as clear or as simple as this. But a research study done back in 2021 found that actually this 85% rule is the ideal rate for optimal learning. You want people to succeed 85% of the time for them to be at the optimal rate of learning. Now, the way they did this research was on animal learning and also on machine learning, and the way they're teaching some of the machines AI. And what they find is the best progress of growth comes when you get the vast majority of right. Now, I think that 85, when I first saw that, feels higher than I imagined. I thought, maybe 70% is a pretty good level. Of course, you want to get a bit more right than wrong. So 60, 70, 80%, but that's quite high. And if this is the optimal rate of learning, no matter how difficult it is for us, we kind of have a little bit of a responsibility to try to work out how to give that child that level of success so that we can optimize their learning. And they might still be at the moment, 3 years behind, and certainly not easy for the child, not easy for the teacher. But if we can give them the optimal learning rate, they might be 2 years behind, and so on. And so I challenge you collectively and gently with this idea of this 85% rule. There's a beautiful book that you might like to read as an adult, not particularly for your students, but just this idea of measuring the gain, not the gap. Often we kind of think of, look at all I still need to do. I still don't get all this. And can we instead, as much as possible, help people see, particularly I'm talking about the students that are finding a low love of maths, the ones finding maths particularly difficult, particularly what the core series is there to help, and what a power if that can help some students' engagement and success in mathematics. Sure, if the student's going well, the achievement will look after itself, and they can push themselves and probably accept a lower rate of success to drive them. But for a student that kind of doesn't have that sense of self-belief, can we help them see the gain, the progress they've made from the start of the term, from the start of the topic, from the start of the year? You may know that as humans, we do have a negativity bias. It's far easier to notice, to dwell on, to talk about things that go wrong, what goes wrong, what I'm hopeless at, what my mistakes are, what I stuffed up. And this little cartoon, I think, highlights it pretty beautifully. There's so many good things in a student's day and in a student's life, but there are some bad things and some challenges, and quite often the individual, our brain gets so focused on that as we ruminate over. And so our challenge is to try to help us and see the success, see the growth, see the progress. So as I mentioned, to complement the core series, which is designed to provide students with success, can we encourage you to support the student's sense of self-belief, support the student's passion through your own passion and through the hooks, and also help them notice and see, and even more importantly, feel their progress in your subject. I close with a final slide of another quote that I very much enjoy. And it goes like this, and this is as much to take the pressure off you as the teacher. If an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. If an egg is broken by an inside force, life begins. Great things always begin from the inside. And this is the motivating to the student to be the one breaking the egg from the inside as they surprise themselves, as they are motivated to try, to believe in themselves, to use the resources to grow their potential in mathematics. As a teacher, we don't want to break the egg from the outside force, nor do the parents. We want to nurture that sense of belief and help them break their egg from the inside. So on that note, I'm looking forward to the panel and hearing your questions.
Thank you. Those were great slides from David, Justin, and Scott. So I just had a few more questions that I could put to them. So David, you shared a great slide with the 9 reasons for using core. What would you think teachers have found in your experience the most crucial 1 or 2, rather than just simply using the essential series and just omitting the extension and optional sections?
Look, I think probably the main reason for using core is the accessibility of the language used and the overall difficulty of the examples and problems generated through the exercise is probably why core is more suited to the middle and lower ability students. So providing that support, focusing on revising key content and moving through new curriculum at a balanced pace, I think I'll say it like that, is probably the main reason why we think core is the best resource for some students.
And Claire, if I add the gentle gradient that David was referring to, and Claire, as we've chatted in the past, that idea of kind of comparing your growth in mathematics to a kind of a video game. That, if the video game started at level 50, I try it for about 30 seconds and I give up and I think this game sucks. If the video game stays at level 1, I play it for about 5 minutes because I'm enjoying it, I'm great at this, but then it pretty quickly gets boring. And so what video games are so skillful at They go, oh, here's a new little trick for you. I wonder if you can work that one. Oh, there's level 2. Oh, there's level 3. And sometimes if it does jump level 3 to level 10, then suddenly we lost the student there. And so sometimes in the essential series, there can be a jump. And the student, oh, I can only do the... So the gentle gradient with the examples showing right beside there to try to help. It's literally, trying to make it a little bit like a video game within each lesson.
And you think the resources, the teacher resources, which are specifically designed for the core books, you think they would be along the same way? They're better designed to help these students?
Yeah, and I think as much, Claire, the benefit of many of the resources as much is to try to save teachers time. So because the teacher knows I want to give them success, but how do I prepare that and prepare that and prepare that and so on? So we very much empathise with the challenging demands of teaching, and anything that the book and the additional resources in any way, shape or form, and kind of please keep telling us if you've got other ideas, and even this would be more helpful to, that's what we're very open to, because, our passion is students loving mathematics.
Yeah. So another one of the resources that we've got that's also in the essential series, the ATSMA Cambridge investigations that you worked on. Could you tell us a bit about those and how they'll fit into core?
Yeah. So for me, this little part with these Indigenous First Nations people investigations, I was given the responsibility to create these along with the support from ATSMA and Professor Chris Matthews, these Indigenous investigations. And for me, it gave me a hook, and it gave me I genuinely feel privileged to be able to have written these with support, and then go, that's really interesting. This is more interesting than putting tiles around a swimming pool. I'm actually trying to understand how the Indigenous people, saved water back thousands of years ago, or how they built shelters, and the mathematics that they must have known. They may not have called it the same language or terminology that we use, but they certainly had mathematical thinking and so on. So I find probably for me, the inclusion of these First Nations investigations adds a hook. And it may not be quite to every student, but I hope the teacher feels the enjoyment and the interest in that topic that's been investigated, and there's a uniqueness to that, and a genuine, as Kim started when she started this webinar, a genuine respect and honouring of our First Nations people.
Can I ask David, maybe a question for you? Where do you see core fitting into a school, and thinking about different types of schools as well? Some that might have streaming and some that may not be able to do that.
Yeah, so look, where schools have streaming, perhaps it's a little bit easier to employ the two different series. So yes, when there are streamed classes, schools might wish to use, say, the standard series for middle to higher ability students, with potential for opening to high levels of maths at, say, year 11 and 12. And then they might use core for the middle to lower ability students, and leading to a more, say, general maths pathway. Option 2 is perhaps a little bit more complicated, and I think that's probably the mixed ability classes, where a school may wish to choose, say, the standard series for most students, and then core being for some students in that same class. Or the opposite to that, where the core is the main and the standards being used for the higher ability students in the class. Now, I think this is perhaps easier to do at 7 and 8 and perhaps 9 compared to 10, but the core series has been designed to maximise the connection between the two series, especially in years 7, 8 and 9. So we believe that this option 2, mixed ability classes, is actually possible. And in fact, Cambridge have produced a document which shows how the years 7, 8 and 9 books are connected. And so if a teacher is teaching a particular lesson, a particular idea, this document shows which section that is for the standard series and which corresponding section or sections work with that in the core series. Many schools I know do option 2 for 7 and 8, and then option 1 for 9 and 10, where they stream more heavily at the higher year levels.
Thank you,
David,
David.
I'm just going to jump in with a related question that has come from the audience. A couple of related questions that are connected to what you were just talking about. So here's a question from James, and it relates to another question from Samantha as well. Are the core series intended for students working below the benchmark level or a couple of years below, or are they intended for students who are at the same level but who just require a little bit more scaffolding? Samantha also asked, she's intending to run a stream class for year 9, I think it was, of students who are around 2 years below the benchmark level. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the range of students who might get a lot out of the core series compared to the standard series. And then in terms of the teacher, what kind of decisions are available to the teacher to adapt the core series for a range of ability levels? So maybe students, for example, who are aiming to study general mathematics, also to students who are quite a bit below that, who might be intending to study no maths at year 11 and 12 and everything in between.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, isn't there? Because with every series, you try to cater for a wide range of students. And it is probably fair to say that the standard series tries to keep the options open at the higher end. Yes, we are covering all the core, but the standard series is spending a little bit of time on those extending sections and the 10A or optional sections at year 10 level to make sure that those pathways through to specialist maths, math methods and so on is there. So you could, on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of ability level, it sounds a little bit crude, but maybe this standard series is for those around 40 to 100. Whereas the core series, it still tries to cover all the core, but it's aware that there are some students who are operating at 1 or 2 years behind. And that's how we have designed that series, where less time is, or almost no time is spent on extending and 10A or optional, but it's more about developing skills and revising content that may or may not have been covered in the 1 or 2 or even 3 years before. And that's why there are so many consolidating sections in the core series, but still covering the core of the curriculum at that year level in a balanced way.
Yeah, and there's also decisions that can be made about within an exercise, easier and slightly more challenging pathways through the exercise. There's a way of setting the easiest version of an exercise and the more challenging, as well as the choice of which actual lessons in a chapter or topic.
That's right. At the extreme level, at the higher end, you go, right, okay, it's the standard series. I'm doing all the extending sections and I'm doing the advanced work program, including all the enrichment. And then at the opposite end, using the core series, you are choosing all the consolidating in core sections and perhaps less of the gold star, but then you are choosing the easiest work program within the section. So the difference between those is quite great, even though those students might be studying the same year level mathematics.
Claire, any further questions for David and Justin on your list?
No, I think that's kind of covered everything that seemed really the important points.
I think that's pretty close to us being done, Kim. There are a few other questions, but the text that I'm reading is too small for me to be able to read them out. But for anyone whose questions we didn't get to, we will reach out to you separately to make sure we answer your questions. But Kim, over to you with the final slides.
And I've just got a couple of slides to close everything off. Really, the important part is when do we see these books? When will they be released? And I can say that you will see 1st of August will be the release date for the series across the board. If we can move to the next slide, please. We've got quite a few states here with us today, so I didn't put all of the price points in there. There's a lot going on there. I think it's a really good opportunity for you to reach out to the person that is in your state that you can speak to about pricing options. So myself and Annie are Queensland, Emma Kapler, of course, in Victoria. You've got Caroline Poole in New South Wales and Nicole Donnelly in South Australia. My apologies, Caroline's actually for ACT. So welcome to you all here that are from ACT. Otherwise, I think that's everything that I needed to do here. Thank you everyone for your contributions this evening. It's always great to have everyone involved. We've got such a powerful team and it's exciting every time we get to have these sessions together. So those of you that are in the session know that this session was being recorded, so you will receive a copy of that in the coming days. But other than that, please travel safe and take care. Thank you all for coming along. Bye for now.